I'm an amateur ghost hunter and have been since early 2000. In the last 5 years, myself and 3 friends have investigated numerous haunted places, from homes to bridges to graveyards to battlefields, with varying results and experiences. I'm going to share with you part of what I consider to be one of our best investigations, and the only time we've ever encountered what I can seriously call a dangerous ghost. First, I need to tell you in advance, despite some talk of photography in this post, there are no pictures. There are several reasons for this. First, I can't post images. Second, I'm not the one that keeps the photograph archives. And most important, I offer my word in writing to every client that we investigate for that I will not release any information or pictures that could in any way pinpoint the location of the investigation to their home. Believe me, most of these people have a hard enough time living normal lives without intrusions from the media or thrill-seeker crackpots or scam psychics. In case you're wondering, I'm half thrill-seeker, half crackpot. To further protect privacy, I've changed all names involved except for those of our 4 ghost hunters. Let me introduce you to them. I'm Josh, currently 25 years old, earning a degree in criminal justice with agonizing slowness while I ghost hunt on weekends. For the first 3 of my ghost hunting years, I did computer work for the Department of Defense. Now, I work for a document imaging and archiving company. The degree and the jobs are both just to get me by until I can make my living as a full-time writer, which has always been my dream. Next we have Sarah, 26 years old and a business major. I met her online in 1997 and we started hanging out. She was a so-called friend with benefits for a while, but that just sort of stopped happening, and we managed to get out of it while remaining friends, with actually very little effort or heart. I guess we just weren't really very compatible in that way. She has brown hair and brown eyes, and is fairly attractive. She was also the first to take me up on my ghost hunting offer back in 2000. Then there's Kevin and Jenna, fraternal twins who are both now 24. They share features such as hair and eye colour, black and hazel respectively, and had similar noses as well. Rather large, but can't really say that in front of Jenna. You could easily guess that they're brother and sister, but you might not realise they're twins. They've been very close to each other their whole lives. Kevin is a business major as well. Jenna does history, so she's sort of out there. But not in an irritating way. She's just very new agey, spiritual and open-minded. Both were eager to join me in my new hobby, and signed on for about a month after Sarah. We had several investigations before the one I'm about to relate to you. During these early ones, we learned to work as a team, perfect our methods for getting things done, photography, note-taking, etc. And we learned to budget the costs involved. Gas, food, batteries, all of that is expensive, and you end up spending way more on batteries than you might think. More on that later. We also had plenty of time to get used to being tense but bored. Most sessions, we don't see, hear or feel anything out of the ordinary. We also had a little time to get used to being fucking scared. No matter how well prepared you think you are, you're not going to be ready when something happens. But basically, we were a fairly well-oiled machine, all things considered, by the time we took on this mother bitch of a ghost. A word about my stance on ghosts though. I'm interested in them as phenomena. There are thousands upon thousands of reports of ghostly phenomena, going back hundreds of years and even further. The fact that ghostly phenomena occurs is, in my opinion, impossible and silly to dispute. Weird things happen in certain places, as evidenced by thousands of eyewitness accounts, from all types of humanity. Photographs, video, and careful scientific observation and investigation. What is open to questioning, however, is whether or not ghosts are the spirits of the deceased, or if there's something else entirely. I personally believe there are multiple causes, because I've encountered multiple types of ghosts. I do believe some phenomena are caused by spirits or the souls of the dead. I believe others are caused by massive build-ups of emotional energy that lingers after the source is gone. Still, others I think are caused by, layman's terms, I don't really know how else to put this, but as a wrinkle in time. These are the ghosts that do the same thing over and over again, perhaps only at certain times of the day or the month, or even the year, and completely ignore everything around them. Other phenomena, I believe, are caused by intelligent, aware entities that are not deceased because they never lived on this planet in the first place. Things like elements, spirits, and demons. Then we have things like poltergeists, which are not usually spirits but rather are reputed to be psychokinetic energy from a living human, usually a young male or female with some repressed emotions. Basically, there's a whole lot of shit about ghosts that humanity doesn't understand yet, and my team of hunters is not specifically trying to answer any of these questions. Our mission is to observe and record, nothing more, and we do it out of a fascination and a love for being creeped out. We don't charge for our work. It costs the people we visit nothing more than the occasional raided fridge, and we don't even do that often since our investigations usually occur long after dinner time. Also, we're usually too nervous to snack. Anyway, enough philosophy, onto the investigation. The night of the blue-palmed pervert. My family moved up here to Northern Virginia in '93. My parents came up for a week to go house hunting, and dragged me along against my will because I was still a kid. House hunting bored me, so I didn't go with them most of the days, choosing to stay in the hotel where we had cable TV and there was a pool and a small arcade. One day, they came back and my mum told me about a house they'd visited out in the boonies that she had refused to even consider living in because she felt like there was something wrong with the house. Particularly, the basement. She wouldn't even go down there to look around, though my dad did and he says he felt nothing out of the ordinary. I was intrigued, but I eventually forgot about it, and we ended up taking a house in the country, not too far from the one we looked at. In 2001, with my ghost hunting hobby firmly established, I remembered the house and asked my mum if she could remember exactly where it was. We lived pretty close to it, and she would occasionally drive past it on her way to the town of Culpeper, which we visited rarely, preferring Warrenton as it was much closer and much less countrified. So, she had no trouble giving me directions and a description. I figured I'd drive up there to see if anybody lived in it, and if they did, I could see if I could talk to them about the place. I was kind of afraid it would be empty because, if it was, I wouldn't be able to investigate it. I was dead set against doing anything illegal that might endanger my hobby, so breaking and entering a house that was still up for sale was definitely out of the question. I was lucky though. The place was inhabited, and after a year of ghost hunting, I'd gotten pretty good at speaking with strangers and making them feel like they could talk to me. Small talk inevitably turned to my job and my schooling, and hearing that I worked for the Department of Defense and that I was studying criminal justice probably played to my advantage for some people. Surely if the government would let me into high security places, then they could trust me with a ghost story. To keep this from getting too long, and it's already going to be, here's the skinny. The house was owned by a 63-year-old man who, for this sake, I'll call Woody. He was an ex-Marine and a teacher, and had recently retired and his wife had recently passed away. He looked a lot like Sarge from Survivor, only less hair and heftier. He knew something was not right in his house. More importantly, he seemed to have a genuine interest in ghosts. He seemed so lonely, so it didn't take much more than a promise not to cause damage, and to keep the investigation on the down low to get him to agree to let us set up with him one night. The four of us set out for Woody's house, with the usual gear and plan of action. We had planned to start the ghost hunt after dark, but Woody insisted we show up around 4 PM, several hours prior to sunset. Between us we had 4 cameras, 2 film and 2 digital, and 2 tape recorders for interviewing witnesses and general recording during the actual hunt. We each had a notebook with which to record thoughts, feelings and observations, and also take notes. We had plenty of water, a first aid kit, 2 cell phones, and we all had pepper spray. A lot of sites we visited were fairly isolated and you can never be sure who you'll run into. We didn't usually bother with more scientific instruments. We didn't even have anything to gauge temperature with, mostly because our experiences had showed us that if the temperature was going to drop due to a presence of a ghost, we wouldn't need any fucking instruments to tell. We'd be shivering. One side note about the tape recorders. We've tried EVP before, which is where you leave a tape recorder running on some quiet part of the house, hoping that a spirit will talk to you and capture its voice. EVP is bullshit, guys. I know there have been some threads about it here. It's crap. We rarely try it anymore. I'm convinced that most ghosts don't talk, and the ones that can will do so quite loudly, although it's usually shrieking or screaming and not words. They have no need to whisper into tape recorders. The house stood alone and angry looking in the middle of a treeless field. The next nearest home was about 100 yards away, over a slope and on the other side of a grove of trees in the distance. The feeling we got was one of intense isolation. We were a bit keyed up. We always were on the way to a hunt. Anticipation is part of the fun. And to be fair, the house didn't look all that bad. It was a pretty good sized one-story home, and Woody kept flowers growing here and there as well. It really could have used some trees though. Anyway, we pulled into the driveway, leaving our equipment in the car for the time being, and before we got to the door, we were greeted by Woody. He introduced himself to my friends after shaking hands with me. He then invited us inside and showed us the den in the back, which I hadn't seen before, having only sat with him in front of the family room. The den made one thing perfectly clear to us. Woody took his retirement seriously. He had a TV the size of a Hummer and a pool table that wasn't too shabby either. A sliding glass door led to a large back deck, and the grill was hot. Woody had decided to cook out for us since it was early May and wasn't raining or stormy for a change. Like I said, I think the guy was lonely. Oh man though, he made these pepper jack cheeseburgers that would have made him a fortune if he got into the food business. He also had endless stories about his time in the Marines, most of them about drunken nights or FNG pranks. He also told us a bit about having worked as a mink farmer for a while too. Pro tip, minks are fantastic escape artists, and they're mean. But the girls got fidgety when they realised that part of the job included slaughtering the mink, so we didn't stick to that subject too long. We ate, we chatted, shot some pool, and waited for dark so that the vigil could begin. We didn't talk much about the house, or the alleged haunting, since Woody was the only witness. We figured half the team could interview him while the other half was sitting in the basement. That way, any experiences in the basement team couldn't be easily put off as the power of suggestion. Inevitably, the sun decided to abandon us to our fate. It was time to go to work. Rule number 1 for my team was that we broke up into teams of 2, and never left each other's sight when we were on site. The only exception was when one of us had to pee. His or her partner waited outside the bathroom in those situations. We swapped partners frequently to keep us all feeling like we were on the same level with each other. But for this investigation, it would be myself and Sarah as Team 1, and Kevin and Jenna as Team 2. We walked out to the car to bring in our equipment. First thing you do before going on a ghost hunt is put brand new batteries in all of your gear. And the first thing you do before beginning the ghost hunt is check them again. We weren't surprised to find that all of our brand new batteries were dead. This is a common phenomenon in ghost hunting. I don't know why or how it happens, but I do know this. Every single time we found our batteries dead, we've had something happen to us that same night. So while it's fucking expensive, and it's also pretty unnerving, we consider it a good omen to find dead batteries. We swapped them for fresh ones, and this time everything worked. We split into teams of 2 at this point, with the intention of searching the outside of the house for the first floor. Woody led myself and Sarah through the house while Kevin and Jenna checked outside. This search is standard for every hunt, and has a number of purposes. First, we want to make sure that nobody is hiding on the premises with tricks up their sleeve. Second, we learn the layout of the place. Third, we get a feel for the place. None of us make any claims to be psychic, but even us mundane people can pick up impressions. And we can certainly notice areas of low temperature, which often indicate supernatural presence. The search revealed nothing. Even standing at the top of the steps of the basement, neither Sarah or I felt a thing. We brought Kevin and Jenna there, and they also felt nothing. Search concluded, we all made a quick trip to the bathroom and gathered our gear. Sarah and I descended alone into the basement, while Kevin and Jenna went to interview Woody. We left the basement lights off. We each had a flashlight lantern combo, the kind you can pick up for about $20 at Walmart. I love these little things. We both had ours turned on, cameras in the other hand. We didn't use straps, and we also made the girls tie their hair back tightly, because stray camera straps and stray hairs can both result in a false positive phenomena if caught on film. I had a small satchel with the tape recorder and a few other things, and down we went. It's difficult to describe in words, the awful feeling you get heading deliberately into what you believe is a haunted area. Your body kind of tingles. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up straight, and you start to breathe a little heavily. It's entirely involuntary, and it happens every time. No amount of experienced ghost hunting can eliminate that fear. Even worse, once we made it to the bottom of the steps, we became acutely aware of something. I don't want to mislead you here. It wasn't like in the ghost stories where we felt we weren't alone any longer, or felt someone watching us, or anything corny like that. Picture the word wrong by itself, in big, bold black letters on a white sheet of paper. That's the feeling the basement gave me. There was just something not right about it. I felt unclean. Anyway, we searched the area, snapping pictures of everything. The basement was plain. Woody had described what was down there for us, and we found it just as he said it was. Basically, 2 open rooms spanning the entire length of the house, doorless openings at each end forming a circle. In the room in which the steps ended, there were some boxes, neatly stacked, an old table, and a cheap but heavy metal and wooden rack at the far end, filled from top to bottom with paint cans and brushes and such. The second room was liberally covered with newspaper, and there were several sawhorses and a workbench with no tools. Woody had told us he did woodworking as a hobby. He was especially fond of making birdhouses, which a friend of his sold at the local farmer's market for a few bucks each. But because of the haunting, he didn't use the basement anymore except to store paints. He'd put some on his rack that very day, and noticed no phenomena when he was down there. We searched the basement quickly and efficiently, and we settled down to our vigil, planning to wait until the long night if need be. Somewhere up above us, Woody was being carefully interviewed, one of our tape recorders capturing every word, while Kevin and Jenna asked questions and scribbled notes about what he'd experienced. I stood in the opening, closest to the paint rack, at the far end of the stairs upward. The satchel was on the floor next to me, the camera and lantern in my hands. Sarah leaned against the sawhorse. From where I stood, I could see almost the entire basement. From where she stood, she could see the far end better than me. We turned out the lights, and waited, and waited, and waited. We didn't check the time, and we didn't chat much at all, just a few whispers here and there. It was the same boring yet horribly intense routine we'd done many times over the last year. After a while, we'd managed to put the dread mostly aside and ignore it. We only had a vague sense of timing passing down there, and as I said, we weren't really checking watches or anything. But we'd sat for what turned out to be 4 hours when we noticed a faint tapping sound, like 2 fork prongs clicking together, coming from the base of the center wall in about the exact center of the basement. Immediately, our lanterns blazed to life and illuminated the area. Tap, tap, tap. It continued, despite the challenging glare of our lights. It seemed to be mocking us. We were thoroughly creeped by this point, but also very excited. We snapped a lot of pictures, both at the tapping origin and all around us. The sound was coming from a bare wall. There was no objects, no pipes, no nothing that we saw that could be making that noise. We whispered briefly, discussing what we wanted to do. I tried to start up our tape recorder, and fuck me if the batteries hadn't died again. I told Sarah and asked her if she wanted to leave. She hesitated, but she said that she'd stay. So I decided to stay too. Really? There wasn't much question if we were going to stay. This is what we wanted after all, but I'll be damned if I was going to just sit there and listen to tapping. It took a lot of fucking nerve to turn my back on that sound. Tap, tap, tap. But I wanted to keep it busy. So, with the light on, I took to reading the labels of the paint cans on the rack. There must have been 40 of them, every colour of the rainbow, some cans with words like additives and textures, and very few subtly different shades of tap, tap, tap. What looked to me to be the same colour. And anyway, I was pretty swept up in the thrill of educating myself about what kind of paint Woody liked. That was when I heard Sarah give a little gasp and a curse. I whirled around expecting to see some smoking, smirking red devil with a pitchfork impaling my girly girl. Instead, I saw that she'd been pacing on the floor around the sawhorses and workbench, and had torn her pants badly across the side of her thigh on a poorly hammered nail. Tap, tap, tap. I asked if she was alright, and she nodded, told me that she thought so. Then she shocked the hell out of me by undoing her pants and letting them drop to her knees. I guess to check and make sure she wasn't bleeding, but I have a confession to make. I like seeing girls in their panties. In fact, I'd rather see a girl in panties than see her naked. To be more precise, I'd like to see all of you in your panties, all the time. I'm shameless. So when Sarah decided to drop her pants with her back to me to see if she was bleeding, I held up my light to get a good look. Now, she knew about my fetish, and I guess by this point was feeling a little pissy. More on this later. She told me if I didn't get my light off her ass, I would likely find it shoved up mine. I wasn't about to argue. She could do it and blame it on the ghost. Tap, tap, tap. And nobody would be ever the wiser. So, as she bent to pull her pants back up, I reluctantly turned back to my paint rack. Just in time to watch the motherfucker finish tipping over towards me. I'm convinced this day that it was tipped onto one corner while I was gawking at Sarah, and waited until I turned around to come down on me. Anyway, I yelled, scrambled back, then tripped. My camera, and oh, thank God, my lantern still in my hands. Alas, tape recorder, I knew you well. It landed right in the satchel, and the recorder wasn't meant to bear 180 pounds. The rack crashed down within inches of crushing me, and a lot of the paint cans spilled. One landed right beside me and began to spill out, but that wasn't all. The fucking handle on the paint can was furiously slamming up and down by itself right against my leg. I screamed like a scared little sissy girl and flung it away with my hand, then pushed myself up onto my feet, getting blue paint all over my hands for my trouble. As the noisy can spun into the corner, all the others off the rack began clacking and clanging as well. It was about this time that I noticed the temperature dropped drastically. Like I said, I don't need any damned expensive gizmos to tell me if there's a ghost in my face. All of this happened in the span of about 10 seconds. Sarah had whirled around at my first cry of alarm. Then, when the rack fell over, she plainly saw the handle of the blue can clacking by itself. And she panicked just as I had panicked. She bolted for the stairs, pants falling back around her knees and me right behind her. I still had my lantern in my left hand, but left my camera in the rush. She hit the steps and stumbled, and I blindly reached out with my right hand and shoved her along, too scared to realize I was getting paint everywhere. Kevin, Jenna and Woody had heard the commotion and were waiting when we burst out the top of the steps. I could still hear the clanging of the paint can as I reached the top. I kept running for the front lawn, where we finally stopped, both of us gibbering incoherently. Kevin and Jenna, no stranger to panic, rushed out and immediately tried to calm us down. And Jenna talked Sarah into pulling her damn pants up, while Woody stood on the front porch, apparently torn between helping us and gawking at the mess we'd made coming up. After a few minutes of soothing, we were both resting on the grass trying to relate what had happened. What a fucking mess. All three of them confirmed after things had settled down that they'd heard noises as we were coming up the steps. Unfortunately, nobody knew precisely when they stopped, because we were all outside. I apologized to Woody for getting paint all over his basement and stairs, and dripping on his floor. He took it all in his stride. Actually, he had a bit of a grin on his face once he realized we were all okay, and told me not to worry about the mess. It was probably the most excitement the old guy had in quite a while. Kevin and Jenna went down, reluctantly, to retrieve my camera in the satchel. The paint cans had stopped clanging, and the place was just a god-awful mess. But there was nothing supernatural going on when they went down, and they made the usual jokes about us losing our nerve and not being cut out for the game, trying to lighten the mood. Sarah and I didn't find any humour in any of this. I was badly shaken by the rack tipping over. This was a big rack with a lot of heavy paint cans, and I probably barely escaped serious injury. Sarah was even worse. We couldn't coax her back inside the house, so we gathered our cameras and lanterns and notebooks, and the one remaining tape recorder, and said goodnight to Woody after promising to get in touch and see about doing another vigil. The next morning, we went out to breakfast and a debriefing. It's always easier to analyse what happened in the daylight, after some usually restless sleep. The pictures would be developed shortly, and there was always hope we might have caught something. The tape recorder I had was destroyed and would have to replace it, but at least with the batteries having been drained, we know we didn't lose any important recordings. Sarah and I were both in agreement that the tapping was very real, and it seemed to be coming from the same place to both of our ears, and that the place contained no easily identifiable explanation for that sound. There was of course the possibility that something inside the wall was making the noise, piping or whatnot. And Sarah maintained that she would not have dropped her pants in some dingy ass basement in the house of a man she barely knew, and that she felt that she was coerced by whatever was in the basement. She also mentioned that, in hindsight, she felt herself growing increasingly angry without explanation as the hours in the basement passed, which is something that had not happened to me. Knowing Sarah like I do, I have to agree that she's not the type to just drop her pants in front of other people. She's not the show-off type, and she doesn't even expose her navel in daily dress. We could argue that she was concerned she might be bleeding, and that, given her intimate history with me, she felt no embarrassment about uncovering herself for a minute. Because of that argument, we don't really draw any solid conclusions about whether or not she was influenced in our report, but given her statement of growing anger during the night, I'm inclined to believe that she was. Later trips to this house further solidified our opinion on this. In the end, Sarah and I did find some humour in this whole incident. When we got our pictures developed, when the commotion in the basement started, Kevin, Jenna and Woody ran to the top of the steps. It seemed Woody grabbed one of the cameras on the table, which Kevin and Jenna forgot to take with them in the heat of the moment. While myself and Sarah were panicking on the front lawn, and Kevin and Jenna were frantically trying to calm us down, Woody snapped a couple of pictures and nobody noticed. We got our photos back and they contained nothing in the least bit ghostly. What they did have was a great picture of Sarah from the rear, pants around her knees, and an almost perfectly formed blue handprint on her ass where I pushed her going up the steps. Thus, this investigation was unofficially christened the Night of the Blue Palm Pervert. So, that's the story of our first trip to Woody's house. I'm writing it now because I got word from his family the other day that he's in hospital and his heart is failing, and honestly they're not sure he's going to make it. He's remained something of an e-friend since our investigation at his house, and I guess this is my way of dealing with the news that he's dying. The four of us are going to go visit him this weekend. I've been revising for the past 2 days and I'm going to stop or I'll never actually get it posted. I'll answer any questions about the ghost hunting or whatever, if there's any sufficient interest. Also, we made 2 more trips to Woody's house, and something happened both times. In fact, things got increasingly hostile each time. If you guys want, I'll try to do a couple of shorter write-ups about those 2 things during the weekend. I also encourage others to post their experiences in this thread. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like it, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you'll never miss a story. Oh, and if you haven't already, don't forget to follow me on Twitter so you can keep up with the latest goings on the channel.